Hello, folks. Thank you for taking part in our session today. We're excited to be here speaking about all things product management and producing exceptional products. My name is Nick Adams, and I work here at PDFTron on the marketing team. I'll be the one communicating with you in the chat bar on the right-hand side of your screen throughout the webinar. We're very excited to have some great speakers for you today. Chingiz Satir, the SVP of Product and Design at Intralinks, as well as our very own Andrei Safanov, Head of Product and Integrations here at PDFTron. We highly welcome your questions, and we'll try and answer as many as we can with the designated Q&A period at the end of the session. So please submit your questions in the questions tab. Okay, let's dive in. Andre, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. At PDFTron, over on the product team, we rely heavily on our users, customers, and internal customer-facing teams to guide us in prioritization and use case understanding. We serve several different verticals, and as such, it is best to talk to the users directly about their pains and understand how PDFTron document technology platform can help solve it, and whose main focus is security and powering mission-critical applications. One of the customers that we serve is Intralinks, who focus their technology on merger and acquisition, alternative investments, and banking and securities. They actually share a very similar methodology and framework when it comes to product creation, in which customers come first when we build products. Without further ado, I would like to welcome and introduce SVP of Product and Design, Chingiz Satir from Intralinks.
Hey, thanks, Andre. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to be here. I believe we are in a real inflection point as it relates to sort of product development these days. What I was saying was like, look, you know, obviously in this world that we're operating right now, everybody's working remote, right? And so more than ever, we really sort of need to assist users, you know, in the products that we develop and provide a lot more automated intelligence. So, you know, that's a lot of what we're doing at Intralinks right now. And we're really excited to sort of talk about that and how we got from sort of a concept stage all the way to sort of, you know, delivering a product to market.
Awesome. Well, perfect. Well, thanks so much, Chingiz. Pleasure having you here today. And for this webinar, let's go ahead and walk through how you went from an idea to actually building the product. Really, I want to get a better feel for how your team brainstorms and get your take on the best possible course in defining minimum viable product.
Absolutely. Like, you know, when I can't wait to sort of try to take you through what we're doing in terms of sort of you know, what we're doing with a real product perspective, our new offering called AI Redaction. Well, I think what I want to do right now, sort of like you said, sort of take you through, you know, again, that process that we look at in terms of determining what an MVP is. Like, so when we set out to sort of build, you know, a new offering, there's lots of sort of internal and external sort of validation that goes on in determining what that MVP is going to be, right? And at Intralinks, you know, we sort of leverage a modified version of Scrum of Scrum. We call it rapid planning. And it starts with, you know, what we call an initiative trio. That's, you know, the product management leader who takes the lead. The other two folks in that trio are design and development. And the first thing that we do is we really sort of have a set of kind of 1 to 3 meetings where we have a goal defining meeting. And this is where we define sort of, you know, who the key participants are, you know, state that and define what the top level goals are, as well as, you know, what's known and what's not known around sort of what we're trying to target as an offering. And at this stage, you know, we also sort of start to look at, you know, what that implications are in terms of design. Do we need to sort of initiate research or discovery because we need to actually go and seek out more information or not? That's really kind of the first step. The next step is really where the PM leader sort of kind of gets the group to summarize and all our sort of document and document all our assumptions around what the goal is that we're trying to achieve, what the known flows are, what the inputs are that are going to be needed for the next phase, which is basically the workshop phase, right? And so in workshopping, you know, this is where PM, design, and engineering are working with key stakeholders. And who are those key stakeholders? They're sales, they're support, they're customer advocates, they're subject matter experts. And the goal here is really to share that user flow and understanding with the idea to have an outcome and a definition of what the MVP is going to be, right? Out of that workshop, you know, we might find it necessary to go off and do a design sprint with select customers because of where we're at from a maturity standpoint on that definition of the MVP. But we might also have enough, right? So that's, you know, that's really sort of the first 3 steps of what we need to do. And there's 2 more that we do to sort of get to that stage where we're now sort of iterating and developing product, and trying to bring that to market. And that fourth step is really about making that MVP real. So again, documenting the MVP in the form of epics and stories and high-level wireframes. And from there, we're sort of iterating and validating even further with our subject matter experts in the form of reviews, and beginning to sort of have that jump-off point where we can sort of now start the sprint process, right? So that process continues, along the way, right? And we sort of start to get to a place where now we can actually demonstrate something, a really early version. That again, validate with stakeholders and adjust as needed. So, at the highest level, those are sort of the 5 key steps that allow us to sort of build and iterate on product. Well, I'm going to sort of kind of hand it back over to you, Andre, to sort of see what you're thinking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So over on our side, PDFTron, and even though if you think about it and compare the two companies, PDFTron size and Intralinks, at PDFTron, we primarily serve kind of B2B businesses, and we're an SDK that gets embeddable into other number of different products. However, the flow for the product creation is actually very similar to the 5 steps you described, Chingiz. And our steps are very similar in a way where we follow the OKR framework, objective key results, where before any feature or product that we set out to build or plan, we really need to have an objective. And it sounds very easy, kind of very easy. You set an objective, you set a set of measurable results. Yeah. However, coming up with that objectives usually is kind of the hardest part, and that's kind of your step 1, where you really kind of trying to define that goal. And you're trying to meet with all the kind of the stakeholders and the users, and really kind of trying to represent the customer voice and trying to make sure that you capture that objective correctly. And as soon as the objective you came up with, you need to come up with kind of key results that kind of can show you how you're doing in terms of performance, how you're doing in terms of kind of delivering that objective. And just like you said, I'm just going to go back to the slide of product development and design trifecta is kind of product team will know kind of customers and users and interface closely with the customer support teams. On our side, it's a lot of kind of pre-sales or solution engineering, where we get a lot of ideas kind of for the next products or the next features. However, it's just one mind. It's great to have more pairs of eyes, more brains in the room, and kind of combining product development and design really helps us to kind of brainstorm and get different perspectives into how one could go about, building the experience and best UX practices, or even from implementation and scaling standpoint as well. And then kind of just like you said, like making the MVP real, step 4 is that, once you kind of define the objective, once you have the key results, when you kind of brainstorm, it's time to create the wireframe or initial prototype. And at that stage at PDFTron, we try to get that wireframe out just to confirm before we even kind of build anything if we're heading in the right direction. So we bounce it off to the users, we get their feedback, and we're trying to scale kind of more of the customer product phase group, where our customers can provide us kind of insight rapidly, and we can build and iterate on that. So we can say like, wow, we didn't even think of that. We didn't come up with that. So kind of getting the rapid feedback is great. So the next, for us, we'll build and iterate, actually implement it and kind of get it out. And, when I think about having the right balance between time to market and validating the MVP of the product, sounds like you guys came up with a perfect model that is both impactful for your customers and the business. One question that I have for you, however, is when you're in really early discovery phase, how, when, and where do you engage with customers? Yeah. And what is your philosophy in terms of early product thinking as well as early prototypes?
Yeah, that's a really good one. This is really important, right? Because we like sort of you're saying, right? For us, it's whenever and wherever, right? We want to engage with our customers early and often, right? So, our philosophy here at Intralinks is that we instill in our teams is to sort of work through the lens of the customer. What does that mean, right? It means, that we're working right beside them. We're stepping out in the field. And of course, these days in this pandemic world, it means that we're doing it virtually, but we're doing that to sort of see firsthand, how they conduct business, how they execute on tasks, right? How and where are they sort of, needing to sort of, where are we needing to sort of get that direct feedback in terms of, next gen products too. So other things that we've done in the past and we've continued to do is we host global customer roadshows, again, virtually these days, but customer engagement activities, again, where we're sort of doing this ongoing sort of engagement with customers and really looking to sort of get that rapid but meaningful feedback on what we are doing right now, as well as sort of, kind of looking around the corner as well. Oftentimes, Andre, these roadshows sort of become catalysts for more feedback, right? They lead to sort of even more participation in what we talk about in Intralinks as a design partner program. And that's super important, right? Especially when you're sort of working with really strategic clients, but really for all customers in general, right? We want to get that firsthand knowledge around new concepts and products and even get our customers hands-on the products, right? So we're always looking for those kinds of opportunities to make sure that we can do that whenever and where we can.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Customer engagement, that's kind of the similar principles and the similar way we involve our customers to kind of understand and provide the key validation of an MVP. Something that I do, again, because PDFTron kind of serves the developers or developer community in terms of building out the products, I really want to stay as connected as possible. So what I do is to build empathy, to understand the users, to understand the developers. I often find myself that I would pull off some of the backlog items of kind of the Webyear, our product, and try to implement some of them and get the critique from my developers to make myself a better developer and really kind of build the rapport with the users. But also at the same time, be able to travel out to the customers and see actually how they work in the field and try to kind of anticipate some of the pains or the gaps in the solution. And that's how, for example, how the Webyear offline mode kind of came about is because, we've traveled to the sites where engineers have to go out into kind of remote areas and they don't have good internet connection and they still need to be able to perform some of the work that they do. And as such, we would never be able to kind of experience or understand that why we're building that feature by not connecting directly to our customers. So the next question I want to kind of touch on is how your users or customers help shape the product, especially as it relates to how artificial intelligence, a very hot topic right now, was implemented in terms of user experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that I would say is that, there's got to be before I sort of even get into that, there's got to be this organizational sort of commitment, right? As it relates to sort of design, and especially the intersection of design and artificial intelligence, right? That's super important, right? So oftentimes organizations fail in this space because they don't have that sort of commitment. They don't have that sort of commitment in terms of engaging like customers, like you were talking about, and like I was talking about a second ago. So when it comes to implementing AI, right, there needs to be sort of this, design experience that I kind of talk about as human in the loop, right? That's a key element, right? So it's, what do I mean by that? Well, there's artificial intelligence or the machine intelligence aspect that is really about sort of assisting and making recommendations, right? But it's also sort of the flip side of that, right? Where the user needs to feel comfortable being able to interact with that and to be able to validate things that are being recommended by the machine intelligence. And so think about it as a partnership, really, right? So, organizationally, I think, one, there needs to be a driving force throughout the product development lifecycle around design, right? So that when you're thinking about that in the context of AI, right, there's real forethought that goes into sort of how you develop the right type of experience where users are going to adopt the technology and use it in a way that's going to help them be more effective, right, in their day-to-day job. So, again, it starts from the top, but also from the bottom up too, in terms of, how do we do that? How do we design experiences that are going to be really meaningful and allow the sort of the artificial intelligence to evolve along with the users that are using it?
When it comes to PDFTron and the components that we provide, we focus on kind of providing a robust components that can be easily embeddable and used by someone and iterate upon and extend even further. So, for example, one of the components that is used in Chenggi's product is PDFTron's Webyear, where we provide robust document viewing, searching capabilities, as well as the redaction. our Chinggis product team brilliantly took that and extended that because they were connecting directly to their users, understanding their pains, and then extending it further to assist them in that specific process. Now, for us on the PDFTron side, it's very important to be able to provide, not just the wireframes, but a building blocks that then can be grabbed and extended and styled. So, over kind of to you, Chinggis, in terms of, I really, really want to kind of see your side of the story.
Yeah. I think I know where you're going with that, right? So, again, one thing that's really important here is that, you're not only sort of thinking about, how you're going to create an experience that will be adopted when you're thinking about how AI gets infused into a product. But even before you get there, right? One of the things that we did at Intralinks is we created a design system that would allow us to sort of create, kind of common componentry, right? That is sort of built for that purpose of not only creating a consistent experience across our platform and our products, but it also sort of helps us be more efficient in terms of delivery to market as well. So, that really is something that sort of, I think a lot of, organizations, think that there's an element, there can be a little bit of a heavy lift, to kind of get something like that off the ground. But once you have something like that established in your organization, boy, is that an amazing, tool set, right, behind the scenes that allows you to sort of think more clearly, think more diligently, right, around sort of the aspects of how something like design will have an implication on sort of the new up and coming technologies like machine learning and AI and how those things sort of intersect.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of when talking about building, so investing some time into building the design component system, it also ensures the consistency across all of your kind of the product lineup. So everything that you kind of build, you almost set yourself up for success with all the building blocks that you have in place.
Okay.
And then the next thing you do is just now that you have the user requirements coming in, you're understanding their pains, you're no longer thinking how you're going to go about solving it, but you're just solving it right away by building upon using the existing blocks. And where you already spend the time, you already kind of prototyped, iterated with the designers on those individual pieces, and now they're just all fit in seamlessly.
Right. I mean, honestly, Andre, what that does is it affords you more time around sort of interacting with customers, interacting around sort of iterating, right? Iterating on sort of the designs that you ultimately will have done, sort of your homework, right? Enough of the homework around that in terms of engaging with clients and validating and kind of working through with them. And, that's what you really want, right? Because that's going to lead to, a high degree of adoption of your products in the marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the point that you kind of touched on earlier around that, by having an established kind of building block system or a set of components that you can build with, just leaves more time for the customer and the user engagement. And that's very crucial, right? Because, maybe a lot of the companies, previously, and some of them that didn't see success, or even some of the companies that scaled big and kind of turned into the large monolithic structures, the downfalls there was around kind of following this almost like a waterfall process, right? Where they engaged with the user kind of one at the beginning of the problem statement formulated, and then they went off into their kind of silos, and started talking and kind of figuring out how they're gonna start building and approaching it and coming up with all the designs. Where, something that PDFTron and Intralinks does much, much differently is that we check in with the customers all along the way. And sometimes, when you're kind of getting on the journey and setting that objectives and key results, well, it actually might change. Like the user requirement, the market is going to change over time. So, Chinggis, from your perspective, how do you react to some of the changes, or maybe from your career?
Well, those are some really good points, right? I mean, I think that, we have to be able to respond dynamically to the market and to our customers. And if you don't sort of have sort of some of the foundational things that we were just talking about in place, it makes it that much more difficult to do that. right? So when I talked about that 5-step process, right, that we use in terms of sort of how do we engage with customers, how do we do different, validate and determine, the MVP, and it's not just a one and done thing, right? We might be 3 sprints in, right? And as we sort of kind of do some further engagement with key stakeholders, and which sometimes will be even at that later stages, will still be with customers, right? We may sort of have another sort of element, another factor that comes into play that might alter that definition of the MVP just this much, right? But that much, right, is ultimately what is going to help us be more successful, right? So we want to be able to sort of continue to do that kind of thing, within sort of reasonable, measures, right? I mean, you can't go too nuts, right? Otherwise, you never get product out the door. But it doesn't stop after products out the door either, and that's sort of the second point that I wanted to make, right? And once things are out the door, right, even the early stages again of prototypes, right? You talked about that a minute ago, right? You're sort of saying that when you were kind of handing it back to me, is prototypes. You can call it a beta, you can call it sort of a early adopter program, whatever you want to name it, right? At the end of the day, right, it doesn't stop once even the initial version of the product is out the door, whether it's an early version of the product or it's a GA version of the product. We continue to sort of have those dialogues and engagement with customers around sort of evolving the product, right? And so that's another element of sort of, what you need to do to build products that are going to be successful. It doesn't stop, right? Just like learning never stops, just same thing with your customers. You're not going to learn, right, unless you kind of continue to kind of see what's really actively going on in the market, and in sort of folding those things in that make sense to, based on where you have a right to play in the market too. I mean, those are all the, certainly market considerations too, but sort of making the right decisions. You can't do that though unless you're like having the right dialogue with the right folks.
Exactly, Cengiz. And I'm just going to go a little bit off script here, because I think
Sure.
as a product leader, a lot of product leaders would be wondering that. So, I think we have secret sauce, or the formula for success here, kind of outline how to take the minimum viable product, bring it to the market by listening to users. One thing that I do want to mention is how to deal with competition, and that's often the case. And for me, kind of on the PDFTron side, is that you could spend all your time looking at the competition, and a lot of companies that kind of deviate from that path. They're like, oh, okay, let's take a look at what our competitors are doing. But I think they're missing the crucial point of the objective here is listen to your users and your customers, because those are the people that you're working with. Those are the people you're setting up the partnership with. And as long as you keep meeting their requirements, this is what's going to get you ahead in providing the quality product that serve the market, rather than always looking behind and checking. What's your stance? Kind of how you?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? So too often, right, folks look at the competition and they say, "Hey, I got to go do what those guys are doing." And on one level, that might be an okay thing to do, right? But the smarter thing to do, right, is to sort of continue on that model or that thread that you and I were talking about, right? Continuous customer engagement with a variety of different ways in which you're engaging with customers, strategic customers that are going to find different and new and interesting ways to kind of, stretch the realm of what's possible, right, with your product and market, regardless of what industry you might be in, right? And it's those folks that are going to help you sort of look around the corner, right? Sort of the art of the possible, right? And I think and I'm not talking about pie in the sky type of stuff. I'm talking about things that, key capabilities and key sort of innovations, right? That you're not always going to have that right lens on. I talked about it a little while ago, right? We need to sort of have the lens of the customer, on a continuous basis. And that means at the end of the day that we need to have ongoing discussions around how are our products aligning to what they're trying to do as a business, right? And if you have a better understanding of what that is, what those things are, right, you can sort of look around the corner a lot better in terms of how's your product going to evolve to not only sort of meet their needs, but sort of identify common needs that will span across many, many of your customers. And that's obviously the the ideal situation, because you don't want to get in a place where you're doing a one-off for a customer here and a customer there. But if you have a program that's built around sort of continuous customer engagement, you're going to be able to start to identify common patterns that are related sort of to the industries that you serve, right? Based on the product that you've brought to market. So that's super important, right? And I think that you have to be pragmatic sometimes, but I think you also sort of need to have that in your pocket. And I wouldn't even say in your back pocket, in your pocket, in this pocket right here, in the front pocket, right? To continuously sort of engage with customers in that way. So you're one step ahead of the competition. You're not doing what the competition is doing, right? And that's sort of the approach that I would take.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I agree with those. And to the point that you mentioned around kind of the noticing those patterns and be able, I think that's also how I think of or approach, as well as coach the product managers over on PDFTron side, where, there's a number, 101 different prioritization techniques that you can apply to your product backlog, to kind of identify what do you want to kind of pursue and build next, and decide what features go in MVP and MVE. And, most often I feel like the different prioritization techniques, they will kind of they will really err on one side or another in terms of kind of focusing too much on one thing, and having the right balance in terms of kind of noticing the patterns in the user market, recognizing those patterns, and then kind of adjusting your backlog in reaction to those patterns that you notice around kind of the features. I feel like this way would really allow you to kind of not just pick the most obvious items that are yep, this one is going to have the most impact to the most users, but also some of the smaller items that on their own might not have the most impact or might not have, but together, they're not just making the MVP, but they're making that experience, right, of kind of the user of interacting with your product. And I think Intralinks actually captures that really, really well, and kind of focusing not just on the bigger ticker items okay, check mark, we have this, kind of component, or we have this, but really how the experience, the design, everything kind of connects together.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of it's sort of intertwined in a way with sort of some of the things that we talked about earlier on in the conversation, which is whether it's design system or common frameworks that you need to develop. Well, let's talk about that in the context of AI, right? So one of the things that we did, right, is we created a data science framework that we knew was sort of kind of taking on the right sort of design principles and data principles, right, that would allow us to extend it in different ways, right? So our first implementation of artificial intelligence had us sort of classifying documents and comparing that documents to sort of what you could have in the due diligence process. That's a checklist, right? But that same framework now, right, is allowing us to do something even different. So you can extend it in different ways. So now, right, we're sort of, leveraging some of your underlying technology. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And then sort of augmented that with artificial intelligence to sort of identify sensitive data and redact that at scale, right? So what does that mean, right? So if we're under the covers, we're creating repeatable, elements in our code, right? Repeatable design elements in our, that help us sort of effectively deliver more consistent experience. We're also able to serve and extend into different use cases in a much more rapid way. And if we're doing that alongside of that sort of customer engagement model that we talked about, then we're sort of able to go off and sort of address new use cases, but with the same kind of common underlying frameworks and components that allows us to sort of, deliver new products to market in a much more effective and timely way.
Yeah, Cengiz, this has so far been a fantastic conversation. After all, it's really not just about how we can get to the market faster and beat the competition, and the two things that we talked about already, but it's about delivering meaningful products through AI-assisted experiences that honestly help users execute.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about, right? It's about making sure that our customers can do their jobs more effectively and help their business ultimately, drive the bottom line, right? What the business is looking for. So, I've got a really cool idea. Why don't we show off a little product now? What do you say?
I would love that. After all, this is a product webinar.
It's a little bit of an impromptu. I'm not sure if we were going to do it today or not, but I did have one of our principal engineers at Intralinks sort of join the call. Pete, if you're on, I think you're on. I see you there.
Yeah, I'm on.
We wanted to sort of have Pete join the call and sort of take you guys through our new AI redaction offering. So Pete, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Andre. So if you just give me a second here, I'm going to share my screen. I did load it up. So basically what I'm going to show you here, as they said, is our AI redaction offering in VDR Pro, which is the Intralinks virtual data room platform. And to build this, we basically took a baseline component from PDFTron and combined it with our own existing security and AI systems. And the result is really something that customers can use to conduct due diligence more efficiently and at scale. So I guess to jump right in order to access the feature, you basically go into VDR Pro into an exchange, which is basically what we call the work area for documents around a particular business transaction. You can then go to the AI assisted redaction tab here. And this is going to be the main area which drives all of the redaction work for a particular transaction. So you see in this area, there's already a bunch of documents over here. You can add more documents to the area. You can edit the redaction and look at the AI assisted markup. And you can also customize the AI experience for this particular transaction or exchange, being able to basically turn on and off certain types of sensitive information which you'd like the AI system to automatically mark for you. In addition to AI, there's also a decidedly non-AI feature where you can set your own custom searches, which are just basic keyword searches, and these sort of blindly run on every document in the system. Every time a document is added to this redaction area, we're going to always search and mark this. And this being here is sort of us saying, we know we're building a system that's going to be constantly improving, but in case we do miss anything, you always do have that ability to also do your own sort of searches at scale and not waste time repeating the same processes over and over. So from here, we could actually jump in and look at some of the markup and see what it looks like to work on redacting a document with AI. But first, I should probably mention what it takes to get a document to be ready to do that. So every document in this area goes through several steps of processing ahead of time. We basically take the document, we OCR it. We take all that text and we send it off to the AI system at Intralinks, which basically reads through that, determines which of that information, which of the text is sensitive, and then it creates a model, which can then be loaded when you open the document, which then basically provides you all of the markup which it thinks is sensitive. So basically, this process here, as you can tell, is basically interactive. We're going to be doing our best guess at what's good, but it's really important for you to, as a subject matter expert, to give your feedback as well, and to basically improve our system by modifying it and tweaking it to be just right. So I can actually go into one of these documents right now, and you'll see what the experience is actually like. So as you see when it loads up, if any of you have looked at the PDFTron components before, this should look a little bit familiar on the right. What we've basically done is taken the PDFTron web viewer component and heavily customized it, leaving mainly the interactive document editor on the right, but completely changing the section on the left to better manage and allow modifying all of these AI suggestions. And the nice thing about this was that building this with the PDFTron web viewer component was super easy. We didn't need to ask them for any custom code. We didn't need them to modify anything on their side. Because of the way that PDFTron does actually build extendable components, we're able to take this and sort of extend it right out of the box to actually have a pretty different experience than what the standard web viewer component is.
Yeah, I'm gonna interrupt you right there for a second, Pete, right? Because what Pete just said, right, really much resonated sort of what Andre and I were talking about a minute ago, right? Having sort of reusable components, right, that allows you sort of to work more effectively and deliver products like this. Back to you, Pete.
Sure. And that's definitely been very important to us as we work through with the PDFTron team. It's been great to be able to utilize that. It's helped us get to market a lot faster than if we had to sort of start from scratch on something. So as you can see over here, as I said, here are the AI recommendations, and here's the document. We can start by actually going through and looking at some of these AI recommendations. And I think what I tried to do here is I actually tried to grab a document last minute, which I think the AI does okay on, but it's not that great. It gets some things right, but it definitely gets some things wrong. So you can basically see that it will be an interactive process where you can start off going through and trying to correct anything that it got wrong. So you can see this is a list of names over here, which it's actually marked and said, these are sensitive, you should mark these up. By and large, this looks pretty good. I think we should probably keep just about all these. I don't see anything that's obviously not a name. If I go down to companies, there's a lot of companies here. I bet some of these might not actually be company names. So if I keep scrolling down, I think there's one or two at the bottom. Yeah, process, that's clearly not a company name. It kind of got that wrong. So we can click this unmark and it's going to automatically remove any of the markings of the word process over there. Also, I'm guessing manufacturing isn't actually a company name. So you can do this. And this is, again, heavily leveraging the PDFTron component, but it's just us building extra components on top of their component, which interact with it and are dynamically changing the regular web viewer. So once you've gone through and worked through all the AI redactions, that's just the first part of the process. It's really up to you then to go over to the document itself and see what it missed. So in this case, as I mentioned, it clearly missed a decent amount of stuff. Over here, you saw it got a lot of names, but some of these I think are probably companies. So what you would want to do is go through and actually mark those by hand, going through and correcting it like this. If you see some stuff which is repeated, we do also expose the regular PDFTron search capability, which is something that just you get right out of the box with the PDFTron web viewer. And that has a nice feature where you can type one search term and it's going to automatically mark up all instances of that in the document.
I think one of the other things that we've done too is we've sort of exposed the ability to sort of do more rules-based searches as well. So regular expressions is another way for you to sort of augment the AI as well as sort of the subject matter experts sort of coming in there and validating what we got right and what we didn't get right.
Yep. And so just to be clear, I mean, this is basically the process right here is you really would go through the document. As much as we do want to have AI help you with it, you still are the subject matter expert. And it's really up to you to have final say on the document. For anybody who knows about due diligence, I don't have to explain to you how critical it is to make sure that absolutely no personally identifiable information sort of sneaks through in these documents. The good thing is, though, by letting the AI sort of do the first work for you, it takes out a big chunk of it. And then by you correcting the AI as part of that process, we're going to hopefully learn and actually improve. So the next time you use it, it'll maybe do a little bit better.
Yeah. And so that, what you just touched on, Pete, that's super important. Again, if I go back to sort of the conversation that Andre and I were having around sort of, where the machine intelligence, is sort of working hand in hand with the human intelligence, right? That whole human in the loop thing. We're, as subject matter experts, the AI is, again, to Pete's point, is not going to get it right all the time. But if you design it the right way, right, the way in which users are interacting with the actual application, the AI learns from, the corrections that are being made by the subject matter experts. So that's, again, so when we think about the experience of how users interact with something that is being machine intelligence recommended, right, super important, in terms of sort of that feedback mechanism loop.
100%, Jagis. So assuming we've gone through and updated the document, you have a couple of options here. You could save a draft of all your changes, which could be reviewed by a coworker or by you in the future, or you can go ahead and actually redact the document using Redact and Replace. And what Redact and Replace is going to do is basically going to be, it's going to create a clean revision of the document with all of the text you see marked here fully removed. So it's basically safe to share with customers. So I can actually change the name of the document as part of doing this. Let me add a little redacted word at the end of there, and I can click Redact and Replace. So here it's basically going to do the regular PDFTron redaction flow. One thing to notice is we really are, again, this is all built into the web viewer, utilizing the fact that they do have this really powerful web component, which despite running in your browser is able to actually pull apart and manipulate a whole PDF file and literally rip out parts of it and create a clean version of it, which any of you who are sort of as old as me and remember the old days of links and internet like that, quite crazy to think that all this can be done right in the browser.
Come on, Pete, you're not that old.
Yeah. So anyway, you can see it did redact in the end here. One thing you didn't see is that as part of the redaction process, it basically did do that feedback step as well. So it took that final redaction that you did, compared it to what we had suggested, and sort of sent the delta off to our internal AI system. And that's basically going to let us learn for the future what it got right, what it got wrong, and if there were sort of any parts where it didn't think it was sensitive, but that actually should be marked up.
Yep. So that's that learning element that we were just talking about. Yeah.
So that's pretty much all I had. Before I try to see if there are any questions, I do want to really thank Andre and the whole PDFTron team about this. I've been working on developing this since the very early days of the product with just a couple of other developers, and they've been really great at answering all of our questions, being really responsive, sending us sample code snippets when we had questions how to do things. It's been great working with them, and I really can't wait to see what features they do next, and also how we can maybe take some of those features and use them to sort of further streamline the due diligence process for our customers.
Yeah, for sure. And Andre and team, thanks to you guys. It's been fantastic.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Engis, for your kind words. Thanks so much for a great demo, Pete. By the way, the demo was fantastic. The product is great, and I loved how we just kind of jumped in at the end and made this product-centric webinar all about the product, and it is, and the UI and the user experience of how users can kind of organize the multitude of documents that you have and just kind of easily kind of flow through the process, taking out, the pain. And like, just think about it. Like, I want to kind of ask Chingiz or Pete in this one kind of question from my perspective is that, before you introduce kind of the AI assisted technology, how long would it take the user to manually go through and kind of mark up that document?
Yeah.
And after that, how much time is it saving them in between?
Yeah. So it's the answer is a really long time, right? And it depends on, the number of documents, but, super manual process, right? Super manual process in general. And sort of when you're going through the whole, due diligence process of, whether you're doing a merger and acquisition, divestiture, whatever the scenario might be, right? There is this, element around sort of the legality aspect of documents that are being, reviewed as part of the due diligence process, right? And today, what happens in the due diligence space is it's literally manually done, right? And hours and hours and hours. It could take days, depending on the sort of the volume. So it's sort of it kind of depends, but basically, the idea here was that we would provide a mechanism by which we can sort of scale this process, right? But in the background, we are also sort of continuously learning the machine algorithms that we've created and the design experience that goes along with that is sort of taking those kinds of things into consideration so that it gets better and gets better and gets better.
Yep.
Right. And, I think that's exciting, right? Because, we're helping, our customers sort of, be more effective, be more efficient. And honestly, when you're doing a deal in the due diligence space, it's very time sensitive, right? So, the ability for us to sort of help and sort of speed up that process with a increasing higher degree of accuracy, that's important. That's super important in our space, right? So, we're pretty excited about it.
I did see one question in the chat that I did want to answer, which said, is this all web viewer or is it using some backend server-side processes? So the backend server-side processes are all just the AI, basically ahead of time sort of determining what the sensitive terms are. Right now, the way this is deployed out for this early version, we don't go ahead and redact the document or do any of the markup using their SDKs on the server side. Instead, what we do is in a very secure server of our own, sort of keep track of the critical keywords that our AI has determined. These are the ones that should be marked up. Then once you load the web viewer, which is strictly on the client side, we sort of send a request over there with that listing of the words that should mark up and where they are in the document. And the web viewer then dynamically, through JavaScript, basically marks all of those words up before you start working with the document. I see one more question. Does PDFnet meet all the underlying document conversion needs for your redaction product? Or do you augment your PDFnet implementation to provide broader and enhanced conversion from source formats? It does a great job. It definitely does provide a lot of different formats. Because we're relatively early days with this, we've been heavily focused on more of the formats that PDFnet does. Certainly, though, behind the scenes, we've also, as part of building our AI service and a whole text extraction service, which I didn't even mention yet, and just basically a document service, we do have things in place so that we would be very happy to reuse the PDFnet ones. But if, for instance, there is some esoteric file type which we need to support, which just isn't in the timeline for PDFTron, we could certainly go build something which converts to that before it's opened in PDFTron.
And Pete, just before we kind of move on to the next question, I did want to kind of do a bit of a reveal, I guess, or a surprise for kind of this webinar, kind of talking about the formats that PDFTron supports. So at PDFTron, as it says in the name, PDFs, we originally started kind of heavily focused on PDF rendering, conversion quality, and all the different operations, and as well as taking that technology and scaling across a number of platforms. Now, our next focus was around MS Office documents and providing our own conversion engine that does not rely on any third party or MS Office or any of that. So we build it in the house to offer seamlessly go between the formats across, again, any of the platforms. And just recently with the PDFTron SDK 9 that we have released, and PDFTron SDK is kind of the SDK that powers at core all of our kind of product offerings. We have added advanced imaging module that now enables us to kind of go into the new spaces around images. So we added DICOM medical imaging format, and we added quite a number of other advanced kind of the Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, and a number of other imaging files, or even, kind of if we put the lens back on the documents, the TIFFs that are used kind of in the scanning technology, would be able to work with those formats, just somebody scans their documents in, or even if somebody takes a picture with their phone, and if we're using iPhones, it's HEIC format. And again, we're trying to really move away from the format and trying to focus the user on what they do best in terms of they really kind of want to, I don't care what format it is, I'm really just trying to get my job done.
Yeah, I love that about what you guys are doing, right? You're sort of making the formats an agnostic sort of factor, right, in the equation, right? And so that's super important for us too, right? Although a lot of our, on the due diligence side, most of our documents are PDF. There's certainly a lot of other document formats that are out there too, right? In terms of Office documents. And with the pandemic, right, we're starting to see a lot more video files and being utilized, right? One of the things we did during the pandemic is we created sort of a better sort of video streaming capabilities, of which leverages your viewer technology, right? And so again, right, we were looking sort of for those opportunities we talked about earlier, right, Andre, in terms of, hey, we need to be able to react dynamically, right, in the market, or what's going on in the marketplace. Well, gosh, right, a year and a half ago, we didn't, the pandemic sort of came out of what everybody thought was nowhere. Right. And so everybody's now working virtually, right? What do we got to do to help that, right? Well, we got to give them, better ways to sort of get access to data and information that'll be part of due diligence. And video sort of now is becoming, more mainstream, no pun intended, streaming, right? But that's super important. So love it.
Exactly. And no, I really love kind of the thinking about putting the user first and then collaboration and just building. And by having the PDFTron and Intralinks align closely in the way we develop products and the way we get it out, we can kind of scale and grow together. And I just can't wait, for the partnership to, grow, and all the different features that you guys are coming up with are just amazing. So really, really appreciate everyone's time today and coming onto the webinar.
Yeah, for sure. Pete, thanks for kind of jumping in last minute there and showing things off.
No problem. Thanks for letting me demo. I normally don't do this in any calls. So,
well, it went off flawlessly, and we'd like to see more of that too. And so we can't wait for the next thing.
Again, I really appreciate everyone. Stay safe and enjoy the rest of your week.